Imagine you're miles deep in a forest, far from civilization. Every crack of a twig, every whisper of the wind sends shivers down your spine. You realize you're not alone. Tonight, we dive into 3 terrifying hiking stories that will make you think twice before your next trip into the wilderness. Let's explore the chilling silence of the woods. It was 3 years ago when I decided to take a solo hiking trip to the Wasatch National Forest in Utah. After a particularly bad breakup, I needed time to think, to clear my head, and to escape the buzz of the city. I wanted to go somewhere remote, where I could be alone with my thoughts, and Utah's dense forests seemed like the perfect escape. I packed my gear, just the essentials, and set off early in the morning, the first light of dawn breaking over the horizon as I drove toward the trailhead. The drive itself was peaceful. The further I got from the city, the more I felt like I was shedding my troubles. The roads became narrower, winding through tall pines that stretched toward the sky, their branches swaying in the morning breeze. By the time I reached the start of the trail, I was feeling lighter than I had in weeks. The forest ahead seemed vast, quiet and untouched. Just what I needed. I parked my car at the edge of the trail, checked my GPS, and began my journey. The path was narrow but well marked, cutting through dense trees and thick undergrowth. The only sounds were the rustling of leaves and the occasional chirp of birds high above. It was perfect, just me and nature, no distractions. For the first few hours, everything was as peaceful as I had hoped. I hiked deeper into the forest, losing myself in the beauty of the surroundings. The air was cool, and the ground was soft beneath my boots. Every so often, I'd stop to take in the view. An open meadow here, a crystal clear stream there. It was exactly what I had been looking for. Around midday, I found a quiet spot near a small stream and decided to set up camp. The stream gurgled softly as I pitched my tent, the water sparkling under the dappled sunlight. After eating a quick meal, I sat by the stream, letting the soothing sound of the water wash over me. It was peaceful, serene, the perfect place to forget about everything. But as the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the trees, the atmosphere shifted. The warmth of the day faded, replaced by a cool breeze that rustled the branches overhead. The once gentle sounds of the forest seemed to grow quieter, more distant, as if the woods themselves were holding their breath. I started to feel uneasy, though I couldn't quite put my finger on why. I chalked it up to being alone in an unfamiliar place. After all, I had been looking for solitude. This was exactly what I wanted, right? I shook off the feeling and built a small fire, hoping the warmth and light would calm my nerves. As darkness fell, I sat by the fire, watching the flames dance in the cool night air. The forest around me was eerily silent. No birds, no insects, just the soft crackling of the fire and the distant rustle of the wind. I told myself it was nothing, that this was normal for such a remote area. But the silence was oppressive, and as the hours passed, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't as alone as I had thought. I glanced around, the firelight barely reaching the edges of the trees. Every now and then, I thought I saw something, a flicker of movement in the shadows. But whenever I looked directly at it, there was nothing there. I was on edge, my senses heightened. Every crack of a branch, every rustle of leaves made my heart race. It was sometime after midnight when I finally decided to call it a night. I crawled into my tent, zipped it up, and lay down, pulling my sleeping bag tightly around me. The fire outside had burned low, casting a faint orange glow across the clearing. I closed my eyes, trying to focus on the sound of the stream rather than the strange quiet of the woods. Just as I was drifting off to sleep, I heard it, a soft, distant rustling. My eyes snapped open, my heart pounding in my chest. I lay there, perfectly still, listening. The sound came again, closer this time, the unmistakable sound of footsteps. Someone or something was walking through the trees, moving slowly, deliberately. I held my breath, my mind racing. Who could be out here in the middle of the night? I hadn't seen a single person all day. I listened as the footsteps grew louder, closer, until they were right outside my tent. I could hear the soft crunch of leaves, the creak of a branch bending under weight. My heart raced, every muscle in my body tensing as I waited. Then, just as suddenly as they had started, the footsteps stopped. I lay there, listening to the deafening silence, my pulse pounding in my ears. Minutes passed, but the sound didn't return. Had I imagined it? Was it just an animal passing through? I didn't sleep much that night. Every small sound, the rustle of leaves, the creak of the trees, kept me awake, my mind racing with possibilities. Who or what had been out there? If this story is already giving you chills, be sure to like the video and share it with anyone who loves a good scare. Trust me, it only gets more terrifying from here. By morning, the unsettling feeling had only grown stronger. The warmth of the sun brought little comfort as I packed up my camp and prepared to continue my hike. The forest, which had felt so peaceful the day before, now seemed ominous, the towering trees casting long shadows over the path. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, but every time I looked back, the trail behind me was empty. I tried to convince myself it was nothing, that the isolation was just playing tricks on my mind. After all, I was miles from the nearest town, deep in the wilderness. Who else would be out here? But the memory of those footsteps haunted me, making me hyper-aware of every sound, every movement around me. As I hiked deeper into the forest, the path became narrower, more overgrown. The trees pressed in on either side, their branches forming a thick canopy that blocked out most of the sunlight. The further I went, the more I felt like I was venturing into a place I wasn't supposed to be. By noon, I reached a small clearing, a rare break in the dense forest. It was a quiet, peaceful spot, the sunlight filtering through the trees to form soft patches of light on the ground. I took a moment to rest, sitting on a large rock and pulling out my water bottle. As I sat there, trying to shake off the unease that had been following me, I noticed something odd. At the far edge of the clearing, partially hidden behind a cluster of bushes, was something that didn't belong. A flash of metal caught my eye, glinting in the sunlight. Curiosity got the better of me, and I stood up, walking toward it. As I approached, I realized it was an old, rusted canteen, half buried in the dirt. It looked like it had been there for years, forgotten by whoever had left it behind. But there was something else, something that sent a chill down my spine. A few feet from the canteen, the ground was disturbed, as if something heavy had been dragged through the dirt. I followed the trail of disturbed earth, my heart pounding in my chest. It led me to the edge of the clearing, where the trees grew thicker. And there, hidden beneath a pile of rocks and branches, I found a makeshift camp. At first glance, it looked like any other campsite. An old fire pit surrounded by logs, a torn sleeping bag, and a few scattered belongings. But something about it felt wrong. The camp looked abandoned, like it hadn't been used in years. Yet the fire pit was recent. The rocks surrounding it were still blackened with ash, and the ground around it was littered with footprints. I knelt down, examining the prints. They were human, but old, their edges blurred by time. Whoever had camped here hadn't been gone long, but something had driven them away. I stood up, scanning the area, my eyes catching on a trail that led deeper into the woods. The footprints continued, disappearing into the trees. A cold chill ran down my spine. I wasn't alone. Just as the realization hit me, a soft rustling sound came from behind me. My breath caught in my throat, and I spun around, my heart pounding. At the far end of the clearing, partially obscured by the trees, was a figure. They stood perfectly still, watching me. For a moment, we stared at each other, neither of us moving. I couldn't see their face, but I could feel their gaze. My mind raced. Who were they? Why were they watching me? And why hadn't they made themselves known sooner? I blinked, and in that split second the figure vanished, disappearing into the trees as if they had never been there at all. My heart raced, and I felt the overwhelming urge to run. I grabbed my backpack, slung it over my shoulder, and started walking quickly back toward the trail. I didn't dare look back, afraid of what I might see. Or not see. If you found something strange hidden deep in the woods, would you investigate or get out of there as fast as possible? Let us know in the comments. And if this story has you hooked, don't forget to like the video. As I made my way back to the trail, the forest seemed to close in around me. The trees, once comforting in their grandeur, now felt oppressive, their branches reaching toward me like dark, twisted fingers. The path ahead stretched endlessly, and with each step, the unease grew. The rustling returned, faint at first, but growing louder with every minute. Someone was following me. I could feel their presence just beyond the tree line, hidden in the shadows. My heart pounded in my chest, my pulse racing in my ears. I quickened my pace, refusing to look back, but the feeling of being watched only intensified. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long golden shadows across the forest floor, I found myself in a full-blown panic. I had to get out of there. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I knew that running would only make it worse. Whoever, or whatever, was out there, they wanted me to know they were close. The footsteps behind me grew louder, closer. I broke into a jog, my legs burning as I pushed myself to move faster. The trail ahead twisted and turned, leading me deeper into the forest. I could hear my own ragged breathing, the pounding of my heart, but above all, the relentless sound of something following me. I risked a glance over my shoulder and caught a glimpse of the figure again, moving through the trees, darting in and out of the shadows. My heart skipped a beat and I stumbled, nearly falling to the ground. I regained my balance and kept running, fear driving me forward. The trailhead was still miles away and I wasn't sure I could make it before nightfall. The sun was sinking lower, casting an orange glow over the treetops. Soon, the forest would be plunged into darkness, and I had no intention of being out there when it did. Just when I thought I couldn't run any longer, I saw it, a clearing up ahead. My breath caught in my throat, and I pushed myself harder, my legs screaming in protest. As I broke through the tree line, I stumbled into the open space, gasping for air. But my relief was short-lived. In the center of the clearing was something that made my blood run cold. A small, makeshift campsite, identical to the one I had found earlier. The same fire pit, the same torn sleeping bag, the same scattered belongings. It was as if I had circled back, returning to the very place I had been trying to escape. My legs gave out beneath me and I collapsed to the ground, too exhausted to move. I could hear the rustling again, growing closer, but I was too tired to run. All I could do was sit there, my back pressed against a tree, as the figure emerged from the shadows. If this story left you on the edge of your seat, be sure to subscribe to Nightmare Narratives and hit the notification bell. You don't want to miss what happens next in the world of eerie tales.